psst, psst. Hey, you, get over here. Listen up real quick. Your car is snitching on you. Your car is snitching on you, man. Yeah, this is the fear of every boomer who didn't want a chip on their debit card because that's how they get you. But in this case, the paranoia is entirely justified because automakers are reportedly using our cars to learn about us. And what they do with what they learn doesn't seem like it's in our best interests, even if the vague argument can be made that it's all for our own good. Oh, they're keeping us safe. If I'm ever in an accident, they'll be able to pinpoint my exact location and send for help. I can be rewarded with a lower insurance premium if I prove I'm a good driver. I can track where my kid is every time they leave the house. If my car gets stolen, they can shut it down, track it, and then recover it, etc., etc., etc. But it's hard to make that argument in the face of the mountain of evidence that automakers are not just mining our personal data, but also our driving habits and even our daily routine, and using that information for reasons that most people probably wouldn't be okay with, if they even knew it was happening. And I know, the savvy viewer will likely say that this is obvious and should have been anticipated the moment technology became more prevalent and permanent in the cars we buy. But not all of this stuff is common knowledge, and it's important to know what's out there, what you can do about it, and what you can learn from this entire sordid state of affairs. Because your car is selling you out. It's turning state's evidence. You're driving a rolling Judas. So that's what we'll be talking about for the first Roman report of 2025. Let's do this, yeah! Why am I so hyped? I'm hyped for no reason. I think the coffee's hitting. Roman report at the end of the month, and I make what I want when I feel like discussing cars. Shortly after purchasing a new Chevy Silverado, a farmer from Georgia named Brant McDonald discovered General Motors was reportedly selling information to third-party data brokers, who then sold the information to insurance companies. Alarmed by this, he requested a data report straight from the broker, a company called LexisNexis. He received a document some 350 pages long, with everything from the amount of accelerations to the number of hard brake events he had on each drive. And for as surprising as it was to learn, this wasn't exactly a new behavior for General Motors. Last March, the New York Times reported that, quote, GM had, for years, been sharing data about drivers' mileage, braking, acceleration, and speed with the insurance industry. The drivers were enrolled, some unknowingly, they said, in OnStar Smart Driver, a feature in GM's internet-connected cars that collected data about how the car had been driven and promised feedback and digital badges for good driving. End quote. For his part, McDonald called to unenroll from the program, at which point the agent on the other end gave a pretty ominous warning. Quote, she said, well, even if you turn it off, we can still track you. We can still see what you're doing. And ending the phone call, she says to me, well, I hope you don't find yourself in a situation that you need us and we're not there. I hope you can stay safe out there on the roads. Have a good day. And I was pretty taken back by that statement. End quote. Although General Motors did discontinue the Smart Driver program and stopped selling data to LexisNexis and fellow third-party data broker Verisk, it was too little too late for those who saw their insurance premiums jacked higher than a Subaru going in for an oil change. So naturally, a lawsuit was filed against GM last August by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, alleging that the data collection, which affected most 2015 model year or newer GM vehicles, was done with the intention to create driving scores for each customer, and then selling that information to insurance companies. Worse, the lawsuit alleges that customers weren't being properly informed about what they were signing up for. Quote, General Motors deceived many of its customers when it compelled them to enroll in its products, including OnStar Smart Driver, as part of its vehicle onboarding process, and told them that failing to enroll would result in the deactivation of their vehicle's safety features. Unbeknownst to customers, however, by enrolling in GM's products, they were agreeing to General Motors' collection and sale of their data. Despite lengthy and convoluted disclosures, General Motors never informed its customers of its actual conduct, the systematic collection and sale of their highly detailed driving data. End quote. In addition to supposedly bad habits like acceleration events and hard braking, the data collected reportedly included things like sharp turns and even late-night trips, because I guess we're about one more model generation away from cars having a feature that automatically transforms them into a pumpkin after midnight. This was from CBS News, who also reports that premiums in July of 2024 had increased 19% over the year previous, which is theorized to be due to riskier behavior in drivers. And okay, fair enough, lower premiums should be incentive enough to drive more responsibly, along with avoiding hefty tickets and associated fines, as well as, keeping yourself and others safe, of course. But then, you can't really use that to explain what happened to a 65-year-old Chevy Bolt owner interviewed by the New York Times, who found that his insurance premiums had increased by 21% over the previous year. When he tried to look for coverage elsewhere, he found the premiums were through the roof everywhere he went, with one agent telling him directly that it was due to his LexisNexis report. This for a guy who drove a Chevy Bolt and had never once been in an accident. And while you could argue that age could be a factor in why his premiums were so high, you'd think an otherwise stellar driving record would count for something, even if there were instances of speeding and hard braking. Because you can be a safe driver while still being recorded engaging in supposed bad practices, after all. This was the case with another driver who told the New York Times that his data was collected while taking his Corvette to a track day. And this is one of those cases that proves just how dodgy this data collection can be, even if the idea behind it, other than the obvious profit motivation, whatever, is to improve systems and create safe drivers. Yeah, sure. Because even if the companies collect GPS location data, one would think they're not always going to be able to tell the difference between when you're on public roads and when you're on a track. And so all those hard accelerations, the harder braking, and the sharper turns are getting recorded, and they're being reflected in your record, and they're marking you down as a dangerous driver, which is nonsense because safe driving on a track is still safe driving, even if it doesn't look the way safe driving does on a public road. Of course, this is speculation on my part. Maybe they can differentiate between when you're on a track and when you're on public roads. But by the same token, I don't see any indication that it's really going to matter in the bottom line of your report. Because like your permanent record in elementary school, it seems like these reports exist for no other reason but to penalize you. So who needs nuance? And other GM owners were affected across their countless brands, as one Cadillac owner had to get insurance through a private broker at twice the cost of what he had been paying, all because his LexisNexis report noted some speeding and hard braking over the course of 6 months, resulting in him getting denied coverage from 7 different agencies. This, despite OnStar Smart Driver going completely unmentioned in the dealership paperwork when he bought the car. These reports, this telematic data, as they call it, well, never mind whether or not they can tell if you're on the track when you were breaking the speed limit. Could they tell if that hard and sudden acceleration was simply to merge safely onto the highway? If it was for the purposes of speeding up to safely use the passing lane? Or is this an issue where AI has to first learn how to tell the difference, and I guess everybody gets to pay more for car insurance until we figure it out? What you're essentially doing is penalizing people for using their car in the ways it was intended to be used. I mean, if they're going to ding you, even if you go a few miles over the speed limit, never mind tearing it up on a track day, then what's the point of even owning a car like a Corvette, you know? One of the recurring things I keep coming across in researching this is the volume of people who say they're pretty much done with GM products after this. So are the kickbacks from the insurance companies actually worth having to deal with more unsold inventory than the average American has problems? How does it help the company's bottom line to sell out the trust of their consumers beyond the short-term revenue? Because I can't imagine being this willfully ignorant on purpose, all in the name of money that won't go as far as an honest dollar probably would. Because at least an honest dollar promotes repeat business, right? But then this is all kind of how the auto industry works now. They're poking us with a stick to see what we'll put up with, what we're going to tolerate. And I would imagine they feel insulated from consequences because people aren't just going to stop buying new cars. Yet you kind of see the used market picking back up again, while newer models sit in dealer inventory, unpurchased by a largely uninterested consumer base. Maybe that's why companies are selling data in the first place, to make up on the back end all the money they're not making on the front. Now, for what it's worth, GM isn't the only company with ties to data brokerage firms, as the New York Times article notes that Kia, Mitsubishi, and Subaru are partnered with LexisNexis, while Ford, Honda, and Hyundai are partnered with Verisk. However, it doesn't seem to be to the same extent as with GM, as Subaru noted that they only share odometer data, while Ford states they don't share any data at all. They're just exploring ways to support customers, which I'm not sure I believe, but whatever. If a sucker is born every minute, I've respawned more often than a Marvel Rivals newcomer. On the one hand, I can understand how this isn't exactly new. While insurance companies have directly offered incentives to drivers who install some sort of add-on attachment to their car that monitors their driving habits, usually just going in your OBD2 port or something like that, that at least seemed like it required a more direct opt-in. You weren't just going to be unaware that you were enrolled in the program because you had to install the damn thing yourself. This, however, seems a lot more sinister in the sense that any disclosure about the data collection and what it's used for appears to be buried in the fine print when you agree to use these apps or mobile services associated with having a connected car. And in some cases, the feature doesn't even have to be on to track and transmit data, and you might even be penalized for turning it off. And all because you agreed to something buried in the fine print of a terms and agreements screen. But that's only if the disclosure is even in the fine print at all. You see, while GM told the New York Times last year that all of this is only done with a driver's consent, reporter Kashmir Hill actually happened to own a GM car and went through the entire enrollment process for OnStar Smart Driver. And well, she found no prominent disclosure about data collection whatsoever. And so taking that into consideration, the lawsuit filed against GM makes a lot more sense, particularly if this data was being collected and sold off without going far enough to ensure that drivers were made aware of these potential uses of their data. So this is a current event show, right? And what I offered was a bunch of findings from last year. So what's the current event here? Well, it's related to the data problem we're facing and how it could become a major issue in the years ahead for automakers and consumers alike. A report from just before the new year by German publication Der Spiegel recounted a troubling discovery made by one Nadia Weipert, a government representative who also serves as a data protection spokeswoman for her party. Weipert had purchased a Volkswagen ID3 and connected it with the Volkswagen app, on the premise that you could do all sorts of things like preheat the car on a cold day. It was a sensible thought, presumably shared by many ID3 drivers out there. I mean, it's part of the appeal of an electric car, that connectivity and the convenience of automating certain aspects of the user experience. But Weipert's car was doing more than just keeping the cabin warm. Quote, "After setting up the app, her car apparently began to collect and transmit data to the manufacturer, including the exact GPS data of the respective parking location every time she turned off the engine. A dataset was created from which a detailed movement profile of her everyday life can be easily created." End quote. The article goes on to note a similarly unsettling occurrence for a man named Marcus Grubel, himself a government representative. Not only did the data show him parked at his father's retirement home, it tracked him to locations related to his role as part of the Defense Committee. The implication, of course, is that the car would also presumably track him to any sensitive sites to which he might travel, which foreign intelligence operatives could get a hold of and use for foreign intelligence reasons. Because I guess if they're going to make us wait half a decade between Bond movies, we have to get our spy movie fix from real life. It even showed when Grubel went on vacation, which is troubling if for no other reason than that the wrong person would be able to use the knowledge that he wasn't home to basically ransack the guy's house. But then that's all worst case scenario stuff. Right? It's not like anything bad is actually going to happen to that data. Except, well, the reason this is making headlines is because Volkswagen suffered a data breach that has affected some 800,000 cars across Germany and parts of Europe. Terabytes of information sitting in Amazon cloud storage, vulnerable to hackers and malicious operatives. In fact, it didn't just affect Volkswagen, as Der Spiegel notes that it also hit manufacturers such as Audi and Skoda. The security flaw was discovered by a German ethical hacker group known as Chaos Computer Club, who apparently found all this information out in the open. They didn't even need any specialized programs or decryption tools, or even any of the free programs that they were known to use. It was just out there. This was like leaving your lunch in the office fridge with no label. Yeah, it should be common sense to not eat something that doesn't belong to you, but by the same token, there are people out there who are going to think, well, if they didn't want me to eat it, maybe they should have put a label on it or placed it in a container with one of those lids that you need really thin fingers to be able to open. The Chaos Computer Club basically took their findings and reported them directly to Volkswagen, as well as the Lower Saxony State Data Protection Commissioner and the Federal Ministry of the Interior, so VW could patch this potentially dangerous oversight, since over half of the reported 800,000 cars affected had more than simple diagnostics leaked, as experienced by Weipert and Grubel, respectively. Quote, "Precise location data could be viewed for 460,000 vehicles, which allowed conclusions to be drawn about the lives of the people behind the wheels, as was the case with the two politicians. And all this because the VW subsidiary Cariad, which was once also set up to develop a promising platform for all of the group's electric vehicles with thousands of software developers, made a mistake last summer and never noticed it itself. A whistleblower shared the serious security vulnerability with the Chaos Computer Club and Spiegel. According to the Spiegel research, in addition to Weipert and Grubel, other politicians, business bosses, the Hamburg police with their approximately 35 electric patrol cars, and suspected intelligence service employees are affected. Very few of them are likely to have been aware of how transparent they are in their vehicles." End quote. To Cariad's credit, they took full accountability, which is really what you want to see here, particularly when coupled with swift, decisive action to correct the mistake. Cariad's security team actually thanked them for the findings and got to work solving the issue. For their part, Cariad claims that this data collection is to help improve vehicle batteries and software, and was never intended to report on the movements of its users. And I suppose the silver lining here is that no passwords or payment data were compromised, as I imagine this would be a storm of the brown and smelly variety if that had been the case. And look, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody. There are no people in this universe who don't. I make mistakes. Brian makes mistakes. Even you, watching this right now, you make mistakes. And it's okay. I'll always believe in you and your capabilities. Seriously, I would let you cut my hair. Maybe I'm too trusting, or maybe you're more capable than you even know. But even taking into account that everyone makes mistakes, this specific instance feels like a bellwether for more troubling issues ahead, as the data collected becomes more sensitive, and the means by which it's all obtained becomes more sketchy. We were warned about the encroachment of technology on our vehicles and what that could mean for our privacy, although I'm not sure what we could have done to fight it then, other than just never buying a newer model year car. But what we're seeing now is essentially the chickens coming home to roost, as evidenced by a report from nearly 2 years ago that forewarned about the dangers automakers posed to our privacy. In September 2023, the Mozilla Foundation did an audit of 25 car companies to review their products for privacy. Those brands included Renault, Dacia, BMW, Subaru, Fiat, Jeep, Chrysler, Dodge, Volkswagen, Toyota, Lexus, Ford, Lincoln, Audi, Mercedes-Benz, Honda, Acura, Kia, Chevrolet, Buick, GMC, Cadillac, Hyundai, Nissan, and Tesla. 25 brands, all representing a diverse range of the automotive industry. The conclusion? The team found that cars was the worst product category they had ever reviewed for privacy, declaring that, quote, "modern cars are a privacy nightmare," end quote. The reason is because, as the report explains, cars present a greater number of opportunities for data collection than even a smartphone or smart appliances, because not only can the car itself report on how you use it, the car will have connected features that also report back on your preferences, and if that car requires an app to use some of the features, that presents another opportunity. And oh, I see your car has Google Maps and Apple CarPlay, and now they all have the details on what you like from those third-party apps as well. It's just a privacy nightmare all the way down. Now, of those 25 companies, 84% say they can share your data, 79% say they can sell that data, and 56% say they can actually share your data in compliance with a request by government or law enforcement agencies, with Hyundai going as far as to note that they'll cooperate with law enforcement whether the request is formal or informal. So they don't even need a warrant, they just have to ask nicely. I mean, presumably they would have to get at least probable cause, but I mean, what even is probable cause? Other than whatever the officer says it is. But perhaps the most troubling detail of all is what they learned about Kia and about Nissan, who was only outperformed in poor privacy measures by one other brand, Tesla. Quote, Nissan earned its second to last spot for collecting some of the creepiest categories of data we have ever seen. It's worth reading the review in full, but you should know it includes your sexual activity. Not to be outdone, Kia also mentions they can collect information about your sex life in their privacy policy. Oh, and 6 car companies say they can collect your genetic information or genetic characteristics. End quote. Now, why would they even need that information is anybody's guess, although I'd imagine it's so advertisers can try and push certain products to you directly. Whether it's Blue Chew, or Hims, or the unfortunately named, for me, Roman. But why does your Nissan Altima need to know how you get down, right? You have to drive a Nissan Altima, isn't that punishment enough? And don't even get me started on Tesla, who will happily allow you to opt out of data collection if you contact them. But well, it'd be a real shame if you opted out of data collection and your car suddenly stopped working. Yeah, their company privacy notice states that if you no longer wish to have your Tesla collect data, quote, this may result in your vehicle suffering from reduced functionality, serious damage, or inoperability. End quote. Now that does make sense for Tesla in a dystopian sort of way, since they would presumably need your data in order to provide interactive features, location services, and certain over-the-air updates. But it still doesn't make sense to build a car that would require the driver to share more than they're comfortable with in order to guarantee mechanical stability. But this report came out in 2023, not that long ago, but things haven't exactly gotten better in the mechanical stability department for Tesla, even if you agree to give them all of your data. And naturally, the issue here is that not only does a malfunctioning car present all sorts of physical dangers to yourself and to others on the road, the prevalence of data collection also opens you up to all sorts of vulnerabilities, because as we saw with Volkswagen, data collected must become data stored. And data stored can be data breached. And who knows who's getting their hands on that information and what they might be using it for. The increase in technology in our lives means we have new vulnerabilities to cybercrime every day. It used to be just your computer, then it was your phone, and then your gaming system, your smart TV, your Hitachi wand maybe. I don't know how plugged in you are, and unlike Nissan, I have no real desire to know what you do in the privacy of your Versa. It all comes together to create the same dilemma. Your car can now be prey for the cyber crooks looking to do real-world harm. And that, it's kind of lame, right? So what now? Do we just take it on the chin and move forward? Well, hopefully the courts will extend digital privacy laws to cover the automotive industry, and some states already do. And with regards to ongoing data collection, there are actually ways to empower yourself to know what they have and how they're using it, and depending on what your state privacy laws actually entail, formally request deletion of that data. Alright, so what are the steps? So here's what you're going to do. First and foremost, you're going to want to go to vehicleprivacyreport.com. There's an option to enter your car's VIN, and doing this will allow you to get a rough estimate of the type of data being collected from your car. Now, I know it's weird that being informed about your data means going to some website you've never heard of to enter some more data, but MSN MoneyWise, the New York Times, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation have vouched for this site also, which is good enough for me, although naturally you should only enter at your own discretion. Now, if you want additional information about who knows what, or if the vehicle privacy report didn't turn up what you were looking for, you can request your Verisk report by going to fcra.verisk.com, or you can request your LexisNexis report at consumer.risk.lexisnexis.com/consumer. Yes, apparently consumer is in there twice. A lot of this is going to depend on which data broker your automaker is partnered with. And unfortunately, I don't have a comprehensive list of which automakers are paired with which data broker. But if I was able to find any, I'll display them on the screen right here. Now after this, you're going to check any apps installed in your car's infotainment system, as well as any apps on your phone that could be connected to your car. and you're going to check the app settings to find out what their data collection policies are, and if there is a recourse if you don't want your data shared. If you're worried about your info being shared with insurance companies, Electronic Frontier Foundation advises that when you're going through the menus on the infotainment screen, you're going to want to look for certain buzzwords. For Kia and Mitsubishi, it'll be driving score. For Toyota, it'll be Insure Connect. For Honda, driver feedback. For GM, smart driver. And I'm not sure what the terms would be for other makes and models, but one would imagine they would be along those same lines. Stuff like connect, feedback, driver, driving, etc. Another thing you can do is check your owner's manual's fine print for any details on things like privacy, data sharing, or telematics to see if it says anything about what information is collected and what gets shared. You can also go over any sales paperwork you might have, not just the factory literature, but stuff like lease agreements and other forms. There's a likelihood that it's not going to say anything about data, but you never know. And now, lastly, and perhaps most importantly, you can file a privacy request with your automaker directly to see what specific information they have about you. The Electronic Frontier Foundation helpfully provided a comprehensive list of links to the privacy request pages for over 24 auto brands, and I've linked that in the description. Ultimately, one of the things that's rough about all this is what it's doing to the perception of cars as an institution. For as much as we rag on cars on this channel, we're every bit as sentimental and defensive about them too. And I think a scandal like this could foster mistrust and resentment among consumers about their cars, so that cars no longer become something you grow to love, something that becomes a part of your family and the story of your life, something that is not limited to your daily commute and the weekend getaways, but seated deeper into the bedrock of your personality. That world would be gone. Maybe. Okay, it's probably an overreaction, but the reality is that cars aren't just the convenience they provide, but the joy they can also inspire. In spite of the headaches and the repair bills and the upkeep, but they can also apparently become an avenue for something sinister. Because of all these things that your manufacturer doesn't want you to know about. Things they don't want you asking questions about once you do know. Questions to which you're entitled to have answers. I've never liked the encroachment of technology upon cars for reasons that go beyond just wanting to have buttons rather than touchscreens so I can operate functions without having to take my eyes off the road. No, this is more about how our cars are increasingly beholden to those technological processes, to where an otherwise mechanically sound car might not work because of some tech feature that's been disabled or paywalled or simply doesn't function. And I guess that's a risk with any car, even the low-tech kind, right? One thing going wrong could make the entire vehicle unusable. But car makers now seem maliciously capitalistic in ways that go beyond the usual eye-rollingly dystopian notions of making people pay more to get less. This seems vindictive, it seems intrusive, and in a way, it also seems desperate. A tormentor holding on to the last unraveling threads of control. Its desperation spawned not by greed, but by a keen awareness that people aren't buying what they used to, and they're not buying in the way they used to, and they're not buying from the brands they used to. So those brands sit there and think, we need to learn, we need to know, because we can't reach them any other way. We need to know who we're selling to and how to reach them. And so they corner your car in a darkened parking lot, blowing thick plumes of cigarette smoke and drinking coffee out of a rippled U-line disposable cup. No lid, just hot steam trailing upwards into cold, vulturous eyes, and a mouth that curls into a sinister grin as he leans in close to your car and whispers, "So, You want to wear a wire? And that's a wrap for this month's Roman Report. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm actually desperate to read them, particularly on this topic, because it's so multifaceted, and I know that there are arguments to be made for how this is somehow a good thing, so I'd love to see a devil's advocate in the comments, along with any other arguments or personal anecdotes about data. If you enjoyed the show, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where these videos and many others release early. You'll also be treated to exclusive videos that will never be released here. The link is in the description, along with a link to our merch store with all the ways you can wear RCR. But another really easy way to help us out is to simply like the video, leave a comment, share the video with someone who you think might enjoy it, so we can get a real discussion going. And by subscribing and hitting that bell icon to make sure you're notified for every video. None of this, not the Roman Report, not RCR, not Race to the Bottom, none of it would be happening without you. I don't work for a platform, I work for you, so thank you for your viewership. It will always mean the world to me. Have a great rest of your week. Take care. Open wires, spill the beans required of my needs for you. Open wires, spill the beans required of my needs.